want to say welcome on behalf of the Urban League of the Upstate and on behalf of our interim CEO, Pastor Sean Dogan. He does bring he sends his love to everyone tonight. He could not be here because of 2 previous engagements he had already scheduled. But we thank everybody for being in the room tonight and virtually. If you are joining us virtually, we want to ask you to do us a few favors. We want for you to like this, share this, and comment. We will be monitoring the comment section. So as we go along in this community talk, community forum, there will be someone to ask your questions. So as we get started tonight, I would definitely like to welcome bold leadership in the house, and it has been my honor and privilege to speak with some of them one-on-one, and I know some of them personally, and I look forward to learning the rest of you all and building relationships and looking forward to just making a stronger community. So I appreciate you all being here tonight. For the audience inside, we will have time for questions and answers. We also appreciate you taking time out your schedule to join us tonight as well. Also, if you're joining us virtually, please share both on the Bold Leadership page as well as the Urban League of the Upstate. And once we do that, I think we are good to go. Again, we appreciate you all being here in person and virtually. And I am going to pass the mic along to Dr. Anderson.
Good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Edward Anderson. I am the Executive Director for On Track Greenville for the United Way. I am the former principal at Tanglewood Middle School. And we are excited to be here tonight. We're going to have just a candid conversation with you in regards to mental health overall, but how mental health impacts Black men and Black students as well. So again, I look forward to this conversation. I'm going to pass the mic and let the other guys introduce themselves.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Adrian Mays. I am an administrator at Hughes Academy.
Good evening. My name is Christopher McCanns. I'm the principal of Florence Chapel Middle School in Duncan, South Carolina.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Corey Collington, the proud principal at Berea Middle School in Greenville County School District.
Good evening. My name is Carlos Grant, proud principal of Wade Hampton High School here in Greenville.
Good evening. It's Wallace Hobbs. I'm the principal of Welcome Elementary. Proud to be here with you tonight.
Good evening, my name is Daniel Walls, and I am the principal of Montague Elementary School here in Greenville County.
Good evening, my name is Pharrell Thomas. I'm the principal of Waterloo Elementary School in Lawrence, School District 55, but I reside here in Greenville County.
Good evening. My name is Edgar Henson. I'm an assistant principal at Malden Middle School in Greenville County.
Good evening, my name is Leonard Galloway. I'm principal of Glenview Middle School in Anderson School District 5.
Thank you, guys. And while we are excited to talk to you today about mental health, we actually have 2 mental health professionals here today as well to help facilitate this conversation. And so we're going to give them an opportunity to introduce themselves as well.
Hello, I'm Marissa Childress. I am a mental health therapist at Travelers West High School.
Good evening, I'm Royce Miller, licensed professional counselor practicing in Clemson, South Carolina.
All right, thank you all. And so we are excited, right, to be here tonight to discuss and share our stories, to share our experience, to share our resources, tips, strategies around mental health. This is a heavy topic. As we prepared tonight, we had many conversations around what did we talk about, how do we stay in our wheelhouse. As we share each other's stories with one-on-one, we realize that we all have some things that have tremendously impacted our mental health And it still does, things that happened long ago. One of those things that we know is that trauma is real. And trauma are those adversities that we face, right? Trauma can change the brain. It can change how we function. And then issue on top of issue, challenge on top of challenge, inequities, racism, all of what we're dealing with, all of what our community has to go through creates this toxic stress. And when we're dealing with toxic stress, we become impaired, we become crippled, and we don't even know it. I like to use the analogy, and I think a lot of mental health professionals do this, in terms of, when we have a broken bone in our body, we go to the doctor and we get it fixed. We take the time necessary for it to heal before we begin to utilize that again. When we go through a trauma and our brain is broken, it's damaged, we don't really give it the time it takes to heal because it's unseen, but we should be taking that time. So as we begin today, I hope that you're able to take from this group again some of our stories, hopefully some of it resonates with you, and again, how we've been resilient in order to get to this point to become bold leaders in this community. And so I'd just like to start with just an open conversation from the gentleman in regards to any personal stories that you would like to share in regards to your experience around mental health.
My name is Pharrell Thomas again, and we kind of talked about that, and when we were thinking about our experiences and some of the things that we have gone through and some of the traumatic things that we have dealt with. One of the things I dealt with, I got married at 21 years old, and my wife was 18, and so we were young, still kids, sort of. And throughout that marriage, we adopted a child. Within 6 months of our foster child at that point coming to live with us, we had our first child. So we didn't adopt because we couldn't have children. We adopted because we saw a little girl that needed a home, and we wanted to provide a home for her. So within 6 months' time, I now have gone from a husband to 2 children. And so then about 21 months later, I have another child. So now I have 3 children. And I think at the time I was about 25 or 26 now at this point. And my wife is 23. And so we're now with these children, we're growing. I decided to go back to school to become a teacher, as a matter of fact. And so in that time, I really kind of forgot about my family. And not really forget in a sense, but I went back to college. I pledged a fraternity. I'm like 27 years old at this point, and I'm trying to relive that stuff I should have done when I was 18, 19, 20 years old, and no responsibilities other than myself. And so in that time, my wife and I kind of moved away from each other because my sister actually, and this is my sister here, she's speaking tonight. So she was actually on campus as well at USC Upstate. I was there, and I was rather popular. And my dad worked there on campus, so a lot of people knew us and things. And so now I'm in a fraternity, Kappa Alpha Psi, so I'm doing the same. And I still have a family at home, so my wife is like taking care of kids, and she's probably, thinking of some things. And then so my wife came home one day and said, I don't want to be married anymore, and I don't want to be a mother. And at that point, it really kind of hit me. And I didn't really know how to take that. And it just got really bad. And then so my wife ended up having an affair that I found out about. And that kind of devastated me. But I looked at it like others was me. I kind of neglected my family to do the things I tried to go back and do. So I remember one particular night, it was rough, it was hard. I just really couldn't see myself without my family, without my wife, and it was one night I took a bunch of pills. I just couldn't take it anymore. I was wanting to just end my life. And you know what? The part about it that happened when I was so upset, the next morning I woke up. And I was like, you've got to be kidding. And so I'm now still faced with this. And it turns out, so my wife and I, we didn't even talk for about a week or so, and things got really kind of contentious. And we went to go see her dad for Easter, drove to Atlanta, came back home. She had a flat tire in her car. I changed it. It was the first time we had talked in about a week. And we talked. I changed her tire. She went to work that morning, and she never came back. She was 25 years old. She had an aneurysm on the lungs, and she died at work. And so now I'm 28 years old with 3 children, and now I'm dealing with that. And I don't even know if I never talked to anybody. I didn't feel like I felt like at that point I needed to be strong for my children. My children didn't see anybody, and I said to myself, and I've said to some other people, I don't think I ever know how much this is going to affect my children until they're older. And I think that just looking at some situations with my boys and with my daughter, I think that's been a big part of their life. Right? So I've maneuvered through some things and been resilient, but you know, I tried to take my life one time, and that was tough because I just could not deal with what I was dealing with because I kind of neglected some things.
Well, thanks for sharing that, man. As you were talking just now, I started thinking about a lot of things on my mind about my own life. Question for you real quick. Let's dig into this, man. So like, that's a pretty heavy thing that you just shared with all of us. And it was brave and bold of you to do that. Talk about why do you think, even at that stage in your life, the aspect or the idea of seeking therapy or help is like so far distant, or that we can't bring ourselves to do that. What do you think that comes from?
Yeah, you know, I just think in that situation that, you know, we're looked upon as being strength. And even, I guess even in my mindset, it just becomes that you look at it as being failure. And sometimes failure is hard to accept, but failure is really part of the process that we all must go through to even to be successful. But, and like I think Dr. Anderson said it perfectly, when there's a visible break or tear or something, and we go to the hospital because we can't use a limb because it's a torn ligament or a broken leg or some sort, there's a visible hurt or unuse, but we don't see feelings or emotions of being those things that's broken and need to be fixed. And I'm gonna tell you, at that stage of my life and age, I'm just like, I got so involved with my children, I didn't even think to even go to see somebody about that. I mean, it was like, my wife died, I was a senior in college, about to student teach. It's like, where was I gonna find time to do that? And my children were 2, 4, and 6. How was I gonna take care of me? And I don't think I've ever even taken care of me in that situation.
I'll share. Go ahead.
I think one additional thing, particularly in the African American community, as to why we are very hesitant to discuss our mental health and our story. We are a very religious and spiritual
race. And I think that ultimately, you know, if you were going through that, if you were to go to, you know, someone at your church, because you know the Lord and you were attending church, they would tell you to just pray about it. Or give you a scripture and say, you know, if you keep your mind stayed on Him, He'll keep you in perfect peace. Well, I'm striving to get this perfect peace, but I can't sleep at night. I'm striving to get this perfect peace, but, you know, my mind is racing and I'm contemplating taking my own life and I'm trying to raise these kids. So I'm very curious. I'm glad now that there is a transition in the African American community where we are open and bold enough to have these type of forums. I'm curious to know from our expert panelists, what do you attribute this transition to, this openness and this boldness in addressing mental health, particularly in our community?
It's difficult to be open, period, and to talk about these sensitive issues. No matter who you are, we all have problems. And also, no matter what age, you have problems. You know, problems transcends culture, race, you know, age, and we're all going through something at any given point in time. And yes, it's true for us as African Americans, it is very difficult for us to trust because of the history and the background of being portrayed in our history. I think the stigma and the stigma of mental health, the resistance to mental health is reducing. It has reduced significantly over the last, I would say, 20 years or so. So we're doing much better. I myself, you know, the clientele of African Americans is growing, but it is quite difficult. But I think the transition starts, to answer your question, with being open with someone you trust. It doesn't necessarily have to be a counselor, but it just needs to be somebody you trust. Vulnerability is hard because we're talking about weakness. We're talking about hurt, maybe shame, maybe guilt. And I don't want to just give that away to anybody. I'm not just freely opening that up to the masses. So, but there is someone in each of our lives that we can trust. You just have to search for them and build them out, and they're there.
No, yeah, I agree completely. You touched on a few important things with your story. Number one being the history of trauma that we have. That was something traumatic for you, and you recognize that that was probably traumatic for your kids. Have you asked them? Ask your kids if you've gone through something traumatic and go through therapy as a family together afterwards. Hey, this still sits with me. I know it's got to sit with you. Let's talk about it. Let's go through it. Let's process it. We sometimes don't do that. We focus on how it impacted you, which is still important. Do that and go through that, but you know it impacted your kids. You just don't know how. You don't have to wait 30 years for them to have a breakdown with alcohol to figure out that they're still upset that their mom died 20 years ago. You don't have to wait that long.
And I think sometimes too, in the Black community, in the Black family, we sometimes normalize things that we know that's wrong. And, you know, I can't tell you how many times I've been around family members who know that, you know, someone may have molested someone, but you just don't talk about it. It's not something you talk about in the family. And you always have that story, you know someone's getting beat at home, but, you know, you don't talk about that because that's your uncle, that's your cousin. And so I think when we get to that point of starting being comfortable and saying, this is my story, this is what's happened to me, then we'll be better off. But too many times we like to normalize it, and it's not normal. It's something that we need to talk about.
To add to that, the normalization of things, I think that especially for men, you know, pride is a big issue for men, you know, because, you know, it can happen to anybody else, but it ain't gonna happen to me. You know, that might happen to him over there or to that family over there, but it's So I think that as men, especially black men, pride gets in the way. And we walk with blinders on to a lot of things that we don't even really want to acknowledge as trauma. We're like, oh, that's all right. That's just the way life is. It's just the way things happen. But we don't even really take the time to be vulnerable enough, like you stated, to even acknowledge the trauma that we face.
Thank you guys for being so candid in regards to this first conversation around personal stories. I'd like to move into another question, but before I move into that question, I do want to share a brief story. What y'all are bringing up is what I often say, and the guys in this group know I say this all the time, is that we all carry this invisible backpack. Our kids walk into schools with invisible backpacks that we do not see, right? They carry the trauma of potential sexual assault or sexual abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse is happening at home, homelessness, not eating. And some of us, in our world now, we've experienced those things as adults. So I do want to ask our professionals in just a second, when we don't handle those things, how do they manifest later? You mentioned alcoholism. 30 years later, alcoholism emerges. And it's because of that void or that gap that we never filled when we were kids or when we were younger. So I'd love to dig deeper into that, like how those things manifest. But the next question I want to circle around really is, as educators, what are some of the things that you've seen in schools, with school-age students, around mental health? I'll share real quick, kids come in on these walls, right? They're built up, and Craig Boykin, an author, we spoke to him this weekend, and he said, it's our jobs as educators to help bring those walls down so we can really reach them. And I can remember distinctly, 3 or 4 years ago at school, we had a young lady who was tearing the halls up. I mean, she was cursing, running into classrooms, accusing people of stealing her cell phone. And eventually I called up with her and I asked her, why are you making such a big deal out of a cell phone? It's a cell phone, it's a material thing, let's talk through this. No, I'm not, it's my phone, I want it back, he took it. So I said, well, there's an appropriate way to handle this. We're going to investigate, figure out who has your phone. So eventually the phone was found, kid did not have it. I sat with her in my office and we started digging. Come to find out that she was living with her dad and her 2 siblings in a motel in Wayne Hampton. And that cell phone, he had trusted her with it. She got any phone call from him about her siblings, from the school, or from him about having to handle the things that were going on in their lives. That was her lifeline. So we weren't just taking a cell phone, we were taking her lifeline. But if we didn't get it, she would have been suspended. She would have been gone for erupting in that manner. But once we knew the root of why she was acting in that way, we were able to adequately and appropriately handle it, and also give her skills to be able to handle it differently if something were to happen again later. And so again, I asked the question, you all have any stories around students in your schools that have experienced mental health challenges and how you addressed it?
Frankly, this year, we've had a uptick in the number of kids who have attempted to commit suicide. And I don't know personally if it's due to the stresses of COVID and the pandemic, or if it's just really life, quote unquote, catching up with 7th graders and 6th graders. But I think one of the biggest things, I feel one of the biggest issues is that sometimes in schools, we place so much emphasis on academics, especially in elementary and middle school, on English, science, math, and social studies. We place all that focus on that, and we don't really focus on the child, the whole child, to where you got stresses, like you said, that backpack, and you come to school and you have teachers who are adding more to your backpack. You have cafeteria workers who are rude and nasty, adding more to your backpack. You have custodians who add to your backpack. You have administrators who add to your backpack. And it's just like this bottle. If we keep adding water to it, it's gonna overflow. And this year, it's just been really difficult on that front to see kids, and they're not always your wild and violent and act out kids. And sometimes it's your all A students who internalize everything and they smile, and then you get a phone call from a parent and say, whoa, how did that happen? Where did you get blindsided? And so I wonder if it's, from my experience this year, it's just been, I struggle with understanding, is it more of the COVID situation or the pandemic, or if it's life, or, did we miss the signs, those sorts of things. So, I know it was a question, but I guess I'm asking for help from y'all, because that's heavy, man, to pick up your phone and your parent tells you, my kid's in the hospital because they're trying to take their life. And, parents entrust their kids to us. They entrust their most valuable prized possession to us. And what if it happened at school? What could we have done differently? What programs could we have had in place? Did I miss something? So I guess I'm rambling now, so I don't people
Edgar, as you were talking, the thing that came to my mind oftentimes is what we can do in school is we have to create this safe space built on positive relationship with kids that will afford them the opportunity and the boldness to come tell someone when they have these thoughts, or which are quite normal. Right? It's this idea that we can't, that we talk about hurting yourself and suicide, that a kid might say, no, I haven't thought about that, but now that you mention it, the kid's not going to do that, but the ones who are having those thoughts, you have this safe cultural environment in your building that's open, it allows that door to open. I sit here in a high school, and oftentimes you look at the big kids, you often look at them, particularly the ones who drive, they may dress nice, and I say, oh, this kid ain't got no problem, he got it all together, he's wearing a three-piece suit over here. There's no way in the world this guy can have anything going on. But that's not the case, right? And I think about, when you ask about a story, I think about kids in my building who were really self-conscious about their self-image, and we were perpetuating this self-image by our dress code. We were, whether we knew it or not, we had systemically created a process that was disparaging kids based on how they present themselves to us every day. And our school saw that. We went through a deep dive to unravel that. And it took a long process. It took some soul searching, some honest conversation with adults about what we believe and what we value. And that dress code's now been redesigned with the help of students. But that one act alone has caused so much of an open dialogue between adults and students that now kids who are, who have these, we have more conversation with kids than we've ever had before. And that's only one example about that cultural shift and change that I think needs to happen in schools.
And I'm glad you mentioned that. You talk about those relationships. As principals, we have to help equip our staffs with identifying and being a safety net for students. I talk to teachers all the time about our students' needs. We talk about it in on track and how can we help support our students, because many of our kids, they're crying. We don't see any tears, but they are crying every day for the weight that they bear. I recently did a project looking at just get some narratives from some of my older 5th grade students. And one of the things that I found out, like Mr. Henson said, was these students, they feel the stress and pressure. Maybe sometimes we can't remember back when we were their age, but they feel the stress and pressure every day. I asked a young lady again, AD student, who's your go-to person? And I was so happy she was able to name off several teachers in the building. And some that were not teachers, some people that just go out of their way to talk to them. So we have to equip our staff to say, hey, our students are going through this environment. We need to be that safe place. And what are we adding to the backpack? Because, I know we always think of homework as an ag, but, she told me, she's like, we have state testing coming up. And she wants to do it because she wants to please her teachers. Her teachers put that weight on them, and we have to be careful in the school system about emphasizing this. Then also, that way that her family puts on her. They want her to perform up to her ability. And she can't sleep at night because of our expectations on her. So we have to be careful as a school and a system in addressing these concerns as well.
Yeah, thank you for that. Another thing that we have to consider, all of us are leaders in education and serve students, but we also serve adults. And one of the things that COVID-19 and this pandemic has done, particularly amongst school leaders, is it's opened our eyes to the sincere passion that many of our teachers have. And this fall, I will never forget, I'm very intentional in making sure I keep my ear to the ground and seeing how my teachers are feeling and how they're acting and responding. And I could tell that they were exhausted, and it was only October. And they were exhausted from inconsistent attendance plans. They were exhausted from transient students that were considering virtual school, being in person. And so I knew that they needed a break. And I remember vividly one evening we were having a bold conversation, and I shared with the guys, you know, I'm thinking about doing this thing called Leave Your Laptop with the Principal. I want my teachers to, this fall break, I want them to really disconnect. I want them to disconnect from work and connect with their families. And when I got that ball going, they were like, you know, I'm gonna do it too. I was like, bet. So I got my phone, sent the email out, and it was a bold decision, and I didn't know if I would get a call from anyone saying, you know, have you lost your mind? What do you mean? You're encouraging teachers to not work on weekends. You're encouraging teachers to take a break. And it was quite the opposite. All of the gentlemen here that are school leaders implemented it in their building. And I learned that something that I thought would be helpful and beneficial, there were colleagues that I worked elbow to elbow with every day that had such a difficult time. Many of them were not able to leave their laptop. They could not disconnect work and life balance. And so I say all of that to say that not only do we carry the weight of meeting the needs of our students, but we also carry the weight of meeting the needs of the adults in our building, because if they're not well and if they're not whole, ultimately that's going to impact our students.
And I often tell my teachers how important it is to build relationships with kids, because you never know what they're coming to school with. And I was looking the other day, a picture that someone sent me. It was a class picture of me in the second grade, and I was in the picture smiling, and I was looking at it, and I said, "Wow!" I said, if people actually knew what was going on behind the smile in this picture. I was in second grade, I was happy, a lucky kid, but when I would go home, I would deal with, my stepfather beating my mom, waiting up late at night, seeing if, she's gonna be beaten that night, going to runs, cocaine runs with my stepfather at the time, and I was dealing with all of that, but I was going to school with a smile on my face. And so I often think now as a principal, that's why I think I go so hard for my kids that are, that might get into a little trouble or might get kicked out of class, because you never know exactly what they're going through. And, I tell kids all the time, I said, this was my story, but you can do better, and yesterday last week we did a podcast, and I talked a little bit about the trauma that I dealt with growing up. And my mom called me afterwards, and I was like, oh gosh, she's gonna get on to me. And she actually, she said, yeah, this is, that's what happened. And she sent me a message. I sent her a picture of my second grade picture, and yesterday I sent it to her. I said, give you, people will just, if they saw this, they just see a happy kid. And, at 42 years old, she apologized to me last night and said, I'm sorry that you was put in that situation. And so I did, you see that, you see kids every day, you think they're good, they're happy, but a lot of times that's just a facade. They're not so, they're dealing with some things, and it's important as adults that we really understand, because you see the outcome of how they're acting, but you don't know why they're doing it. So it's important to do that.
From a personal standpoint, This is something that actually we had a Marco Polo a few months ago, and the conversation about, mental health came up. And there is a certain type of, like, I don't want to say natural, but it's still that comes with it. But I think if you're going to advocate for such things, we need to make sure that, we're good and if we have things that we're struggling with, then we need to go back and pick those things up and try to deal with it. Personally, matter of fact, my friend Royce, I reached out to him. And the thing about it, I know some people are a tad bit hesitant about, sharing that. I'm not, because I think this will be positive. I recently just started there. 2 weeks. But the thing about it though, is just something that it's amazing how something that you don't think impacts you right now is impacting you. And that's why it's so important that, I can go back to some of the things that I can think as a child, and, my, the way I was raised, and going back to the whole church, and I depend on God and everything, but, it's good, we had, in the Bible, there were physicians, and to take care of the body and things like that, but the brain is a part of the body. So I think that God placed people in place to help mend various parts of your body, mend your heart, mend your brain. So I feel that now when I'm talking to kids, I'm recognizing things. Again, I'm just 2 weeks in the game, but I still feel that now I'm not sort of hypocritical in that I'm telling kids to go and address these issues because I'm sort of taking care of things in my own way. So hopefully someone is listening to this and they're struggling and realizing that, hey, we all have our own stories, but hey, they're just like us. So.
I think the thing that's really resonated with me is time. You mentioned earlier where you said we got to dig, and I dig into my students. And you talked about digging into your staff. You told him, don't wait too long. I think oftentimes we get into the hustle and bustle of life, that we don't take the time to do these things. And as an administrator, we have so many things to do throughout the day. We're taking care of kids, but there's so much more that we are responsible for. And oftentimes I don't want to get, sometimes I think, man, I'm taking too much time. I need to move on and get this kid back to class because they got to learn, right? They got to learn, they got to get to class. And so I guess the question that I want to pose to you all is, so I have some kids who they love to come to eat lunch with me every day. And so I have to stop a couple times a week just to come eat when we talk about everything under the sun. And I think that's just a way to build relationships and to kind of tap into their home lives and kind of what's going on. So back to the question to pose to you guys, what are some ways or some things that you do every day or once a week or a couple times a week that you kind of dig into your kids and figure out, what's going on, how can I help you? Something small, doesn't have to be big. But just what are some of the cool things that you may do to kind of take some time to talk to your kids and maybe kind of see some of that trauma?
Okay, and as an educator, the best way to find out what's going on in your classroom is to sit there and talk to the kids. I can tell you everything. One of the things that I do is I play Uno with my kids. I play Uno with my kids, and I'm not hesitant about their feelings. I'm not because if I get that draw 4, I'm gonna drop that draw 4. I'm gonna drop it hard too. But the kids love it. I mean, they love playing Uno. And then while we're talking, while we're playing, that's when the conversation happens. We have a bus driver shortage in District 5 right now, so we have kids getting picked up at 4:30, but we're in the cafeteria playing Uno. And it's interesting some of the things that they have to bring to the table. So.
I don't play Uno. I can't play games with them. I need to go to therapy for them as well. But just what I do is just sometimes I just sit and talk to them. When I was student teaching, I came to this realization that kids don't really like school, and they view teachers and administrators as part of that system that they don't like. But if you present yourself something different from the system, they'll find an avenue in which they can trust you. So I'm like their big brother or their uncle, or someone of that nature, someone who I'll relate with you when I need to, but if you do something wrong, I'm also in that position of authority where I can discipline you. So I just go about it in that approach with them and just have conversations with them. We think kids aren't ready to talk about certain things, but they're ready to talk. They're just waiting on somebody to listen.
I mean, are we going down the line? Ooh, Adrian. So as a first year principal, and I don't know what Wallace thinks about this, seeing that it's like my time is everywhere, and I don't have an assistant principal in my school, so that magnifies it even more. So this is like my idol right here. My role model that I try to aspire to be. This is an $80 buddy at this school, right? So I'm looking at all this Facebook and all these LinkedIn pages, and so I'm like, man, I'm gonna be like Damon today. And I was worn out on Friday. So I did a student of the month luncheon twice. So, and for me, that's the time I get to talk to my kids. The door, they're in my conference room. We eat pizza, we eat cookies. From kindergarten to 5th grade, we have candid conversations. Hey, what you doing this weekend? What's going on? And at that age, they like to hug and this COVID stuff. And before COVID, they like to put their hands in their nose and want to touch you and hug you. And you have to. I don't shy away. And Lord knows I probably don't wash my hands as much as I need to. But it's having that conversation with them and just, not even having a concern even about that. I sit there and have this conversation. But it's tough, and that's a really tough question at that time, because then for us, when you're newly married, and soon you, maybe not soon, but you'll be a father at some point, possibly. And so you got even your own family. So for me, and what David said, as a first year principal, I learned I do not do one single thing at home for work. Once I leave my building, I'm done. Now, I don't know how much that's going to affect me this year as far as but I give all that I can at school. I have a 50-minute commute home. I don't do anything. I don't touch my computer. I don't look at email. I don't do anything. I'm done. So, I like to possibly, that's my time for myself. So the time is a big thing. Because that was one of the things that I said when my first wife passed away and I had my kids. They were 2, 4, and 6. And I said, there's one thing that I would never be able to make up, is time. So I had to, figure out even I'm gone from just, as me and my role was, I cut the grass. That's how my job was outside the house, hers was inside the house. But now I'm cooking dinner, I'm having my groceries, I'm washing clothes, I'm doing all those things. And so that time piece is a huge component, not just in our workplace, but even in our homes.
And I think that's so important that you mentioned that, because that goes into that whole self-care aspect of everything. And I think as administrators, as leaders, as just people who are, seeing a lot of things going on in our community now, in our world now, we have to make sure that we take care of ourselves, because that's important to our mental health. I know some friends of mine who are principals who they have to be the first person in the building in the morning, and they have to be the last one to leave in the afternoons. That is not my portion. That is not my portion. I know that I'm not a morning person, so typically I have 2 very capable assistant principals who open the school, who take care of what they need to take care of, and I come in a little bit later, but I stay a little bit later in the afternoons as well. I know that I have to get myself together in the morning before I see any of my kids. So that self-awareness, I guess, is very, very important as well. But I think it's so important that we don't neglect our needs. You know, a lot of people call it selfish, being selfish, and a lot of people won't, you know, practice self-care because they don't want to feel selfish. But you have to. And that's one of the things I learned. And I'm like you for real. When I get home, I'm home.
I have been reflecting on my experience as an elementary student and the impact that it has had on my principalship and how I'm able to connect with students daily. And I just realized that I might have experienced some trauma. Now let me tell you. All right, so my elementary principal, Mr. Carl Robinson, an African-American man in a rural school district in South Carolina, he was my hero. So much so as a child being raised by a single mom, I took great pride in telling everybody that Mr. Robinson was my dad. And he was the type of principal who was bold enough to say that, yeah, that's my son. So I took great pride in that. One situation, believe it or not, I was somewhat of a talker in class. And so I was called to the principal's office, and Mr. Robinson was a member of a fraternity that we won't mention. And Mr. Robinson had a deal with my mom. This was back in the day where you could, you know, use the paddle. And so, yeah, I vividly remember in second grade, taking wood, and so I say all of that to say, and guess what, I still talk in class. It didn't stop me. But I say all of that to say, as a principal, now one of the things that I enjoy doing every single day is popping in on the principal. Coming to the principal's office is a reward on our campus. It is highly coveted. Students are asking, can I pop in on you today? And so I encourage our teachers every day to send me an email, call me, text me, let me know something good that a student has done that I can celebrate. And so they pop in on me in my office in the afternoon. I write them a certificate. I give them some books, chips, cupcakes, money, pencils, and pens, and it's just a very high energy experience for them. And I shout them out on the announcements, of course, and then I'm able to, you know, ask them about their day. In addition to that, how has your day been? So, yeah, my trauma led to popping on the principal. That's how I build relationships with my kids. Yeah.
Y'all haven't determined already. We love having fun with each other. I love that stuff. I'm sorry, Mr. Qualls. But as you were talking, I kept thinking about a couple things that I do that I'm gonna share with you. And if you can take this strategy that I'm gonna share as well if you want to use it on. I'll share it with you. One thing that I learned from a couple of my principals growing up, Mr. Brown in elementary and Mr. Wright in high school, both very strong, bold black men, and I never knew how they knew everybody's name. I thought they knew everybody's name and birthday. And so I saw Mr. Wright a couple of years back. I had my first principalship, and I asked him about it, and he said, I didn't know everybody's name. But he made a point to make me feel like that. And so today, two things that I do is every morning I send my kids a birthday to him. And people think that's cheesy in high school, but the high schools love it. They cherish it, they respond back, it opens the door for conversations. And the other thing that I do is I'm letting the cat in the bag, so I know that if my kids are watching this, I don't know what to say on that. But they think that I know their names, but what I really do is I stand in the cafeteria at the cash register, and when they come through and sign their name, I say, hey, Corey, how you doing? Hey, Mr. Wallace. Oh, hey, Dr. Grant. You know, and his man, oh man, he knows everybody check out. But I'm learning, right? It's an opportunity to learn the right? And it's, you know, and it makes them, everybody want to know two things. You know their name and you know their birthday, right? I think this creates an opportunity to form better relationships. This is a strategy.
Yeah, I would like to say, as a first year principal as well with Mr. Thomas, you know, one of the most disheartening things is it seems like the higher up you go in education, the less time you can spend with your students. It's really disheartening. And, you know, as an educator, we got into this to work with students. And as a first year principal, and this year, many year, that has been much more difficult. You know, I feel like I'm not myself and my visibility is down when we're handling all of these situations on top of, you know, the normal things that a principal deals with. So, you know, when we talk about that self-care and making sure we do that, you know, I've been trying to ensure that I get that because it is a lot to deal with. You know, when I remember being a teacher, you know, my best days weren't the genie days. I don't remember, you know, I hate to say to my former principals out there, I don't remember not a single teacher appreciation gift. My time in the classroom, I remember my students. And, you know, I think we miss that as principals. I think it does burn us because we don't get to really dedicate that time to the students unless you're slamming draw fours on kids like that. But no, I want to get back to that. You know, we don't have a lot of time, but it's important as a leader of that building that we do make the time. We try to get some small effort, if anything. So every morning I do try to make sure that I am present on what we call our WeTV morning program, give a morning welcome to each student. You know, we like to bring them up and talk about when they have positive behavior. We're the welcome rules, so we say the positive behavior. So we want the students to get good phone calls home. And like Dr. Grant said, you know, oh, I know your birthday. So looking at our school, oh, I know your mama name in our school. So, yeah, so, you know, making those moments for kids. And one strategy I recently learned from our school of psychologist, Dr. Lindsay, was, you know, just to have, you know, a 2-minute talk with a kid. You know, it doesn't have to be about anything. Just sit down. You know, I spent so much time in kindergarten this year that's my happy place. Is just have a 2-minute talk with a student. It doesn't have to be about anything. They'll let you know. Right. And that's been so powerful to have talk with kids.
One thing that I try to do is just talk with my kids and listen. You know, it sounds kind of cliche, but it's I mean, just sit there and talking and just listening to what they have to say. A lot of times, I have, you know, teachers that will send me kids and it'll be their most challenging kids and they're frustrated, they're writing referrals and send them to my office, and I think sometimes they think I'm just gonna sit and yell at them, but I'm actually sitting there having a conversation and finding out, okay, what's going on? Why are you misbehaving in this class? And I find out so much information just from those conversations with the kids. Just sit there and the kids are, you know, saying, you know, this is what's happening at home. You know, I'm having to do this. I don't see my mom. She works late. And just by those conversations, I found out information. And when the kids leave, you know, sometimes the teachers get kind of upset because they want to come see Mr. Collins again. And I'm like, you know, what are you doing in there? We're talking. We're figuring out what's going on with them. And it's not me yelling or, you know, going off or, you know, we're just having a conversation. And I remember as a teacher, I was always that teacher that the other teachers who had trouble with kids would send them to my classroom. Like I was gonna save every black kid that come out there. They just come to my class and we just sit there and talk. And I remember they were like, Mr. Collins, why are you got this, he's in a game. Why are you, having this conversation? Look, I'm finding out all the information I need to know. And, they don't want to go to their class, but, they're always going to come and talk to me. And it helped me with behavior in the classroom. It helped me with classroom management. It helped me with all of that because, when I'm going, whenever there was an issue, I built that relationship with their parents as well. And even when they would see me in the store, it was, hey, Mr. Collins, you helped me. And I see a lot of them now, 25, 30 years old. And they remember those conversations that I had with them when they were 15, 16, 17 years old. And so it's just important to just have those conversations, just talk and just listen. You don't necessarily always have to have a retort or something back to say something back to them. And I think sometimes that's what happens with adults. They want to say something back to the kid, and then it's a big issue. So it's just talking and listening to the kids.
Well, let's go there. Let's go there, because as we talk about what things we can do in schools to address, I think that's the question: how do we set up the best way to to be with kids. Systemically, I think we've done a horrible job. I'm talking any individual person, I'll always do the best we can do, but systemically, we have created this environment and policies and practices that does not allow us to listen to the behavior. Behavior, any good practitioner of education knows that behavior is the kid talking to us, telling us something, and how we respond is our responsibility. That's how we need to have the tools and strategies to say, are we going to be restorative in this conversation, or are we going to be punitive? Right. Knowing full well what the punitive response will lead to. It doesn't lead to a change in behavior at all. It doesn't address the root cause at all. All it does is give us a temporary relief that we're going to deal with on the back end again, and we'll just keep doing it over and over and over again. And so calling out those issues is important. Having a true system. So I'm so glad, Dr. Anderson, that you work with Off Track and helping us find systemic ways to look at what kids are going through and then putting the true interventions in place that's going to allow that to happen. I just need to say that since you took it there, Corey.
Yeah, no, that's an actual perfect segue because I wanted to get into what I told our mental health professionals. We talk about when we don't address these things the way that these men are addressing them in our schools, what's the outcome? So we know, adverse childhood experiences, we know trauma can be mitigated, right? So the impact can be lessened and reversed a lot of times if we provide positive experiences. And so they shared all these positive experiences, playing Uno, building relationships, listening to kids, talking to them. We know that positive experiences, data shows community care, which is y'all providing that community care for kids, can reverse the effects of trauma and adversity. We know that positive experiences can. We know that a safe environment, providing safety for kids can mitigate those factors. But we also know that kids' physical health plays a role in it. Dr. Hampshire is in the audience, and she and her team would often say, that we need to be mindful of what we're doing. We need to develop practices. We need to help kids become more self-aware. We need to develop those social, emotional skills. Mr. Thomas said earlier, I had to become self-aware of what I was doing. Are we teaching our kids as they are matriculating through life? Are we teaching them to be self-aware of where they are, the context of their life, how to seek help, how to advocate for themselves? Are we doing those things? Are we creating the environment and the space? It sounds like you all are. But again, I'd like to ask our mental health professionals, what happens when we don't create those kind of environments, when students, adversity, when people, as adults, when their traumas are not met with strategy?
Ladies first, you are so kind. It's a trickle-down effect. So what that does is, if you don't address it with the one student that you see struggling, well, their friend too, right? It just transfers over. And now you've got a group. Now it's infecting their classmates too. You guys know negativity can spread real quickly in an environment. And so you've got this one kid who hates their administrators and they're talking about you. Well, now you've got another kid who's never had a bad experience with you guys that doesn't like you either for no reason. So if something does happen, guess what? They're biased against you. Just like that other kid might be feeling some sort of bias or whatever. So how are you addressing issues with that kid that is or might be problematic and really getting to what is going on, being patient, being understanding, talking to them so that it's not a trickle down, doesn't spread to the rest of the classmates?
Yes, I agree. It will spread to their peers and spread to peers in the community, and it will most assuredly be negative because kids are going to find a way to be heard, but if left untreated by all of you and by your staff, it's going to come out into some other negative manner. All of us, no matter who you are, we all have emotional needs, and and they're very specific. And I won't go into all of them for the sake of time, but when those emotional needs aren't being met, we're going to seek ways to fulfill them. It's just, it won't be positive, it won't be healthy. And you'll see those negative outcomes, like what was said in your schools through the discipline issues and so forth. And it also spreads to families. It's coming from families, of course, and that sort of thing. I would like to add to all the great things that you guys are doing. One thing in addition I would say is don't just put it all on your shoulders as principals. Empower your staff. Empower your assistant principals, all your administrators, all the guidance counselors, all the teachers, all the custodians. The saying, see something, say something, especially custodians, especially bus drivers, they see stuff all the time. Say something. Just ask them how you do. Have that same mindset that you guys have. Calling these kids out by their name, recognizing their birthdays, and so forth and so on. Because it takes a village. And so when the village is empowering these kids, wow, now we really have something going.
Could y'all share a little bit about the health implications of trauma and the impact the mental health has on our health?
Yes. So trauma, talking about kids or talking about adults? Okay, so talking about kids in high school or in school that you're likely to see, if kids are experiencing trauma, something to really be mindful of is that you might see the acting out behaviors, you might see some depression, you might see some anxiety, but if their trauma is ongoing, if they go home to trauma, they're consistently in it. And so short of, depending on what's going on at home, removing that child from the home, you have to recognize that those symptoms might not get better in a week or a month or next year. So mental health should be recommended for that because it's just something they're consistently working on. Same thing goes for just as an adult, you guys as educators, secondary trauma is very real as well. So you might not have experienced your own personal severe traumas or maybe you got past them, but you guys interact with kids who you've probably got stories for days on. That one kid, you're gonna remember their story for forever. That is secondary trauma. It's really easy, or not, sometimes it is easy to go, shut off, and when I'm at home, I'm at home. My guess is you have one or two stories of a kid who you couldn't forget, who was on your mind all night. That's secondary trauma, and that's just as real and to be mindful of. So if you're not already seeing a therapist, then keep that in mind. That might be something that you might want to check up on too. Once a month, go talk to your therapist and vent all the stuff from the kids that you guys are hearing stories from. Because that kid who committed suicide, or those kids who died in a car accident, I know we've had a few of those this year. The one who comes in with bruises all over them, but they just won't tell you too much, or they're back within that same situation. That's heavy. That is so heavy, and you guys carry that, and you think you don't, you think you go home to your partners or your kids, or you don't accidentally take it out on the kid who got a little cocky with you in the hallway. That stuff carries, and so you've got to be mindful. You guys are saying all that things. You guys got to be mindful of those things too, like trauma affects you, whether it's you're experiencing it yourself or whether it's secondary. The same thing goes for those kids. They have a history of it. If they're still in it, then it's not something that's over quickly. So just be patient, be understanding, and know that it's something they gotta work through.
Yes, the disorders that can happen, of course, we talked about, mentioned depression and that sort of thing. I mean, you can have all sorts of mental health issues that transpire due to these kids aren't being addressed, early on. And so, like you mentioned, they're going to seek out one another and seek out, their peers, which won't be educated help You know, it might be self-medicated help or what have you, but it won't be constructive, it'll be destructive. And that's what it typically tends to be. Once again, because, you know, we're all seeking to have those emotional needs met. You know, we all want love and acceptance. We all need independence and have our skills recognized. We all need spontaneity and play. You know, we all need structure and expectation. We all need that freedom of expression. And when we're feeling that all those things are being inhibited, unknowingly, subconsciously, we're finding ways for that to be filled. And it's just going to come out in bizarre ways. You know, this time and time again, it'll come out in bizarre ways. And it's very difficult to do.
Thank you. I think this portion is wrapping up, but we do, I believe, have some questions from our virtual audience. Or does anyone have any questions? Or comments?
If anybody have any questions in the audience.
Hello, my name is Pamela Adams. I'm a resident of Greenville. It's a beautiful thing to be able to see all you beautiful black men here and the authority and representation that you have for your communities and for your families and children, and to make an everlasting impact on generations and those to come. I have a question. I've enjoyed every moment, all the information that you've all said. And what's next? What is the boots on the ground? What is the next step, the action plan? What you all are not necessarily going to say what you're committed to do, but again, as a member of this community, also speaking to students who are in transient that look like us, and just families all together, especially with COVID. What's the next steps that you believe that we should do as an action plan to help our students and families with mental health?
For myself personally, my next step is, we laugh about it, I'm gonna join my brother Leonard. I'm legitimately serious. I'm gonna go find me a therapist. Because I feel like if I'm going to impact students and families in my community the way that I truly desire to, I have to be completely whole to do so. You can't fix something if you're broken. And so I'm gonna reach out to some people and find someone myself. And the skills that I will learn there, I'll share them with my students, obviously, and also in my personal community.
Also, just a recommendation, DMH is in every single Greenville County school. There is a mental health therapist on site at every single Greenville County school. Utilize them. We want to be utilized in your school, so if you're not already utilizing, go ask them for help. If you need to do a training with your teachers, go ask them for help. If you want to train for just your administrators, go ask them for help. You know, we're busy seeing kids, but that's time that we get on professional work days during the summer. We're there with you guys. If you have questions, you need help, utilize your mental health therapist on site at every Greenville County school. That's not a big thing everywhere, so Greenville County is on
One thing that we are doing as well, we're committed to sharing victory stories. And so on next Tuesday, Bold Leadership will have a conversation virtually with the 2021 Missouri State Teacher of the Year, a young man, Darian Cockrell, who by the age of 9 was in a gang, and his life was headed down a path of destruction. And because of the impact of old educators, he now finds himself leading in the state of Missouri as the Teacher of the Year. And so finding those stories of those individuals that have experienced trauma and dealt with mental health issues, and telling the other side of the story, the victorious part.
I wanted to add one more thing to that question, because it's a very important question, which is what is next, right? So obviously you hear a lot of conversation about one, exposing the conversation and creating this safe space that we continue to do that. So that's going to be a real actionable item that you'll see from this particular group, not only as bold leadership consultants, but also in our various roles as educational leaders. The other real actionable step beyond that is going to be the intentionality we have of creating true social emotional learning strategies and processes within our buildings. I know Ellen Hampshire just got a shout out earlier, but work with individuals like herself, who is with Greenville County, and helping us be very strategic and intentional about making social emotional learning just as important as academic focus is a very real next step. And it can't be a separate side thing or a one day out of the week we do. We do like a yoga day, one day out of the year kind of stuff. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about embedded into what we do, the fabric of everything we do, where social emotional learning becomes the lens by which we also teach academics, is a real next step. And so all of us are charged that responsibility, and we own that responsibility, and we'll take it on gladly.
That also leads into my next question. Do you all have things in place in your buildings for the other educators in your buildings for trauma and social, not social emotional learning, what was it? Trauma and, yes.
I can speak to it from my end, and I'll start with answering that previous question a little bit, and I think it ties in. So again, as the executive director for On Track Greenville, one of the things that I have the pleasure of leading is a process by which students' root causes are identified. So if mental health is identified as a challenge, then through the United Way, we're able to provide community resources, support that school and support that student to meet the needs of that specific child. We also provide teacher supports too. So if a principal were to come to us and say, hey, my staff is in need of some support around mental health, we're able to do that. One of the things that we were able to put in place this year was sessions with a mental health counselor. And so we provided 30-minute to 1 hour sessions for the adults in the building that was ongoing all year long. Speaking to Mr. Henson's point of the adults have to be whole too, they have to be fed. And so we're able to provide those mental health supports for our staff in the buildings that we serve regularly by appointments in the building or virtually, so their needs are met, so they can better meet the needs of the kids. Ms. Adams, Mr. Grant, y'all touched on this. I hear systems, right? So we can talk about, interventions and putting Band-Aids on all day, but until we get to the root of the system, we're going to continue to have greater challenges, not just mental health, but just disparities and inequities all over the place. And so that is one of the things that we are committed on doing, and within BOLD, we do have an action plan, we do have a logic model, and one of those goals for our logic model is within this affinity group, a safe space for Black men, especially Black male educators, to provide mentorship, professional development, and those things, to understand that we have a journey that's similar to yours. We're here. Black men make up less than 2% of the professional teaching workforce, and only 1% are educational leaders across this country. There are not many of us. And so to show young men that are on the same similar trajectory, that you too can get here with the trauma that you have, with the challenges that you have, and we can lock arms with you and give you strategies to be able to overcome and get there. That's part of our mission and our values as part of BOLD leadership. But on the other hand, we are working as a system in our individual skill sets and individual buildings and collectively to address those inequities. We have future plans on some advocacy work in terms of calling out the disparities that do exist within our communities. If not us, then who? And I always say systems were developed to produce the desired outcomes. They produce what they're meant to produce. And mental health, when you go back 200 years ago, mental health wasn't on the docket for how the system was developed. So instead of us trying to tweak at SD level, add mental health components to a system that was built. Honestly, the whole system needs to be redesigned with those things already in mind. And so, again, working and figuring out, strategizing with these men on how do we hold space and trying to influence that whole system design.
Hi, I'm currently studying school counseling, and I just wanted to know what can I do in the future when I get into schools to support minority students and show that I am here for them, since I might not be the first person they would think to come to, since I'm not a part of their demographic.
I would say initially, be who you are. Be kids. They real recognize real with kids, and they'll understand. They'll see if you're passionate about them, if you love them, if you care about them, or this is just my job description. This is what my boss is telling me I have to do. So first of all, be real with them. Secondly, build that relationship with them, and that's how they're going to understand, to know that if you're real and if you really care about them. You know, if you mess up in front of them, own it. Don't try to hide behind it. Just own it. That's one of the fastest, if not the fastest way to lose that kid's confidence. Is to fumble in front of them and try to blame it on something else. They know if you know what you're talking about or not. So just own it.
Yeah, I definitely would say that, because so this is the first time in my career as an educator in my 17 years that I'm in a Title I school and I don't have minority students. So I'm the biggest thing in my building, okay? And probably the darkest, all right? I was trying to think of a way to say that. But kids come up to me, hug me, do all the same things they said. It's like I can't even go in certain classrooms because I'm like a rock star, seriously. But because I've made those contacts and relationships, it doesn't matter that I'm African American and they're not. And so, I went to a baseball game with 4 of my kids and showed up, and some of the parents hadn't even met me, right? And they said, we're almost done with the school year. And so, but their kids, I was there for them. And then, so somebody else heard, now I gotta go to a soccer game next week. But I'll do it. And those are things, you just show up, you be present. It's one thing to just be in the building to be present, but you have to actually be present. So be a presence. So that's what I say, it wouldn't matter that you're not a minority, and that kids are going to recognize those who are there for, like you said, anybody that's who can hear and listen and take an interest into them.
How you guys doing?
Good.
Thanks a lot for everything that you did tonight. First of all, I have never seen this in my entire life. My background was in law enforcement. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we got you.
My background was in law enforcement up north. Okay. So when you talk mental health, I was on the other end of it. I worked at one of the roughest prisons in the state of New Jersey. Okay. So as a black man, how can black men get involved with what you're doing?
Well, if you're talking about this particular group of old leadership consultants we're talking about, or just with the...
Well, just with the movement, because I've been retired since 49.
Yeah.
So I don't really believe it. But I know as you're speaking, this is what I talked about my whole journey in law enforcement. I was an advocate up there, in the inner cities. I pulled a lot of people out of gangs into college. This is a big deal. And to see you men doing this for the first time in my life, I have a big story. So I'll tell you real quick, I had a stroke in 2017. I was actually blind and couldn't hear. So my story is big and it's due to this mental health. You know, these things that are held inside of me, seeing death, you know, at a high level. You know, so when you talked about, somebody told me to come. So I came because it was black men talking about issues of mental health. And I said, it can't be. You know, and when you were talking transparency, that's the problem. You know, we don't talk in transparency. We don't tell our story to each other. So as black men, I know a lot, tons of them, you know, in law enforcement. So how can we get involved? Not just with you, right, but in the community, you know?
So one of the outcomes that we are intentionally wanting to spark is mentorship, and not just mentorship of young boys growing up, right, to be men, but among men themselves, to create this affinity safe space. So we are going to be promoting several opportunities for people to find out ways to create their own affinity groups, join this affinity group, what have you. And we're going to talk more about that. And so afterwards, if you want to connect, we'll give you our contact information. Anybody can go to our website, boldleadershipconsultants.com. We have a whole series of ideas that we talk about on there, and talk about affinity groups itself and how this group became the way it is. But anybody can model a group like this. If you have some, a certain goal in mind, and that we talk about how do we create this trust that we see here. Because it didn't start like this, right? We had to be vulnerable with each other and all have a certain desire to want to get better, ultimately for the betterment of children, which is the link that pulls us together. That's the central piece that among all our various stories as the linchpin of this kind of connections, camaraderie. So let's just connect afterwards.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Dr. Grant, while you're speaking, can you give us websites, contact information for Bold Leadership? And then our therapists on the panel tonight, if you guys would take the time to give us short information on how the community can find you all as well. And then Dr. Anderson, if you can talk about United Way and On Track to help us wrap this up.
Absolutely. So our website is boldleadershipconsultants.com. You can find us on Facebook at the same name. Twitter is bold_leadership. And Instagram, same name, Bold Leadership. So any one of those outlets, you can certainly reach out to us to learn more about our organization.
Yes, my practice is There's Hope Counseling, and I'm located in Clemson, South Carolina, 145 Thomas Green Boulevard, Suite 210. You can also find me on Psychology Today. Just look up counselors located in Clemson, and you will find me. So.
And my name is Marissa Childress, and I work with the Department of Mental Health, and I am a therapist at Travelers Rest High School.
And to Angie's request, so I work with On Track Greenville with the United Way, and the United Way focuses on 3 areas: financial stability, education, and vibrant and equitable communities. And so within vibrant and equitable communities, one of the things that they're working on right now, to your question, was trauma-informed practices across the county. And so I know they're embarking on a journey with churches, faith-based roundtable, of how to create trauma-informed churches. Because we go to church as our space, but then when, as mentioned earlier, when we're not met with openness and we're met with just pray about it, the churches could be adding to that backpack, and then we have nowhere to go. And so if you can reach out to the United Way, you can contact me, Edward Anderson, and I'll get you connected to some of those circles as well under vibrant and equitable communities, and some of the practices that they have in place to try to push some of this work as well. And also, we have a resource sheet that we'll be sharing with Urban League, post on their website. It was created by TJ Romer. He's a trauma-informed social worker for Bold, and it has a list of all the Black counselors in the Upstate, as well as some resources and tips about how to manage and how to self-care when it comes to mental health. So that resource will be provided on our website as well as on the Urban website.
Awesome. This has been long overdue, and I hope that this is just the beginning. Some more resources, of course, the Urban League of the Upstate.org. You can always visit us. But again, I have shared with these gentlemen that I am super excited for the partnership and to see what we can do in the community. Earlier today, we recorded on Project Ready TV. The subject was this month is National Hope Month. And I think today we filled the room with hope. Today we filled the internet with hope. And you guys just are the face of hope. And I appreciate you being here. I appreciate the boldness to step out of what society says is your lane to help capture those that not only look like us, but to your point, ma'am, needs to know how to care for us, how to hope with us, how to walk with us, into making our students better than we are, because they're the ones that's going to sit in the seat after us. So again, I appreciate everyone that came to visit us in person. I appreciate those that visited online. Please make sure that you share, that you tag, all the gentlemen here tonight, as well as the counselors or the Urban League of the Upstate. And so with that, thank you so much on behalf of Urban League of the Upstate, behalf of Bold Leadership, and behalf of our guest therapists in the building tonight. And thank you also to our special guest, Fox Carolina. And until then, I am Dr. Angie Anderson Moten, and I have enjoyed my time with you. Good night.